Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we set ourselves up to finally be ready to build a nuclear power plant. We reinforced our steel production, our coal power, our refinery production, we cleaned up our waterfronts, we built a new wastewater treatment and trash facility, we charged up all of our construction part buffers. We did all the things. We caught up, we paid ourselves back, and we set ourselves up to be ready to dive in today. As you may have noticed, between episodes, I let the game run for just a moment, just to finish a little bit of site prep. This was still an active limestone mine at the end of the last episode, so I filled it in a little bit. I built the cargo depot and technically did start to import the uranium ore. All of which we set up last time, all of which we talked about, so it was just about a little bit of the passage of time. So apologies to those playing along at home for not showing that, but last episode was long enough already, and I didn't want to delay nuclear any further. In the interest of full transparency, though, I do want to call out two small things that did happen. One, I built a second coal train on our mega coal train line just to improve the throughput coming in from our mine in the distance to match our iron ore train throughput too. And number two is I finally ran out of trees. So we officially have cut down every accessible tree on the island. There's a little bit across the water over here, and a little bit across the water over here. They're all gone though. So, we have no more trees. Now there's a plan. Longtime listeners already know what it is because I've been talking about it for 20 episodes, and we'll get to it finally today, but we'll talk about that when we're ready. In the meanwhile, I've just been quick trading rubber since we have an excess of naphtha production over at the refinery anyway, so we have plenty of rubber capacity. So, all right then, it's nuclear time. Let's dive in. Why, what, and how? Why are we doing nuclear? What is it exactly? And how are we going to implement it on our island today? First, why? We're going nuclear because it gives a lot of power with very little opportunity cost. What do I mean by that? Well, a nuclear power plant, the basic nuclear reactor, provides up to 90 megawatts of power, and a reactor 2, which is an upgrade in place upgrade that we'll talk about a little bit later, can get you up to 120 megawatts of power. Considering our current consumption and demand, that's obviously massive compared to our current capacity. Contrast that with coal. We have how many boilers across the entirety of our island, distributed with coal going everywhere. And to provide this 120 megawatts of power, we only have to process 72 uranium ore per minute. When you then, again, contrast that with coal, to provide that same 120 megawatts of power, we burn 30 coal per minute in a boiler. This boiler can handle one pair of high and low pressure turbines, which generates 15 megawatts of power in a single large power generator. So to match that 120, we need 8 boilers of coal going. 240 coal per minute. That represents, roughly speaking, about half of our current coal consumption. Considering that unlike uranium ore, coal has many other uses in the game, that's a very good thing for us to free up capacity-wise. I just told you I had to add a second massive train to be bringing enough coal across our island. There is nothing else to do with uranium ore except to run nuclear power. That's it. There is very little opportunity cost when you talk about consuming uranium ore. Now, I said very little opportunity cost, not zero opportunity cost. The one thing that coal does have going for it is that you can pull it straight out of the ground and put it directly into a boiler. No pre-processing required. That's an advantage it also has over various oil sources of power as well. A little bit of pre-processing required there too. There's a pretty significant amount of pre-processing that goes into using uranium. Now that's a good segue from why into what. So let's start looking at buildings and recipes. What is nuclear? At its core, no pun intended, a nuclear reactor is basically a giant boiler. It takes water and a fuel source, and it outputs steam for you to run through turbines, same as any other power source in the game, except for solar and diesel generators, I guess. The difference is in the complexity surrounding the giant boiler. Now, I personally think about nuclear in 4 stages. 1, ore processing. 2, enrichment. 3, power generation. And 4, waste handling. Let's go through them in order. Ore processing is essentially the 2-step process of turning raw uranium ore first into uranium ore powder. It's one of those ores you have to grind first. And then 2, turning that powder with a little bit of acid into something called yellow cake. Yellow cake is the input into the enrichment process, which we'll talk about in a moment. Don't worry about the small volume here. We are concentrating things down into more and more concentrated power, so the numbers actually get pretty small in general. We use half a uranium rod per power level. That's what we're building towards here. But we make this yellow cake and a little bit of this toxic slurry byproduct. If it looks a lot like the wastewater icon, well, that's a good way to think about it. You run it through a wastewater treatment plant, same as you would with wastewater, with using some of the same filter media, but you mix in here a little bit of brine, and you get back some water and some slag to dump. Easy as that. Now, enrichment is also a 2-step process. It happens inside this enrichment plant building. These buildings can take a number of inputs from more advanced technologies, which is why I separate this out from the ore processing step. Yellow cake is not always going to be the thing that you run through these plants. But for now, this yellow cake recipe is all that we have access to as an input. You mix it with this hydrogen fluoride, which you make by mixing rock and acid in another one of these settling tanks. And it puts out enriched uranium 4%. You take that enriched uranium 4%, you package it with some steel in an assembly, and voila, fuel rods, uranium rods. This is reactor-ready fuel. You also make some of this depleted uranium byproduct, which you can actually safely dump for whatever it's worth, but may want to keep around. I will certainly be keeping some around, because you can use it as an input into some of these more advanced recipes in the future once we unlock those technologies. 3rd step, power generation. Back to the reactor. It's just a big boiler, but it's a big boiler that can melt down and kill half your island. So it's worth talking through the controls briefly. You'll see at the top, heat level and power level. Consumption of fuel produces heat. That heat is in turn what is used to turn water into steam. If, however, there isn't water, or there isn't anywhere for that steam to go, backing up that system, the heat builds up. If it builds up too high, overheats, we melt down. Given the consequences of a meltdown, this is to be avoided. This has a couple implications. One, we will not be auto-balancing the turbines in this system. The steam must be continuously consumed, whether we need that power or not. That means that nuclear best serves as your base load for your power grid. We talked a little bit last time about the value of segmenting out your system's capacity into base load that you commit to continuously producing, and a flexible variable portion that can react to the changing needs of your system over time. We absolutely can auto-balance our remaining coal power afterwards, if we want. Of course, you can always not auto-balance coal and burn it too, even if you don't need the power. But it's simply, in my mind at least, non-negotiable when it comes to nuclear. Whatever level you run your nuclear reactor at, you commit to. It's much simpler that way, and much less dangerous. So, within a reactor, you can make a step change commitment to 1x, 2x, or 3x, but these take a minute to spin up and down and should not be thought of as flexible strategic ability to adjust, but should be thought of as longer-term commitments to produce at a certain level of power. 2. If overheating is so dangerous, it sure would be nice to have some sort of emergency relief valve. And that's exactly what the cooling function is. If you're getting too hot, the reactor will take water stored in a separate input valve. It will expel that water as depleted steam to absorb the excess heat. You can, it's not that much, run out of the cooling water reserve though, and frankly, the reactor isn't great about telling you it's been kicked on. So this also, truly, an emergency function, not something to consider as strategic flexibility. Last thing, you'll see that there's this critical mass of fuel required for the reactor to run. I think there's actually maybe like a real-life rationale for this based on how the physical chemical chain reaction of a nuclear power plant works. Someone who knows the tech better than me should confirm or deny in the comments, but in the game, it functions at least as a nice little buffer so you don't have start-stop issues with fuel trickling in. From there, it's just steam out to a turbine setup, same as anywhere else. Each power level generates 96 steam, which is enough for 2 sets of our latest tech high and low turbine pairs and a power generator. And it outputs, for each level, 30 megawatts of power. Looking over here, for example, right? 48 and 48, so 2 of these, which each produce enough steam low downstream for 2 low pressure turbine 2s. Each pair does 18, which is perfectly absorbed by one of these power gens large. So 2 of each of these components adds up to 30 megawatts per power level. Okay, 4th step is waste handling. So we put in fuel, we get out an equal volume of spent fuel, which is radioactive. That means, unless we store it in a special containment facility, there will be a health impact on our citizens. In the future, we'll get tech where we can recycle this spent fuel as an alternate input to the enrichment step to create more advanced fuel. So it's not a forever problem, but you're gonna want enough storage. Okay, that was Nuclear 101. Theory is great and all, but how are we going to use it here on our island today? Well, location-wise, I already tipped my hand. We are importing from a world mine, which is producing at 72 per minute. Now we're also, once this last little bit of this limestone mine gets wrapped up or relocated, pretty close to a train line. We could redo this little area here and create a train station to import uranium ore from across the map. Over here, I think, is our only source of uranium on the island, that I've noticed at least. And then in the longer run, the only truly infinite or infinitely sustainable source of uranium is via contracts. There are eventually, although I don't think we've unlocked any of them yet. Yep, doesn't seem to be. There are contracts for uranium ore as well. That will come through, or can come through, the exact same cargo depot. So there's also a water requirement, right, to run at each of these levels. 96 water times 3, nearly 300 water. It's a pretty significant water requirement. We're also going to be making, for example, acid that requires water. And we need brine to process the toxic slurry. So a coastal setup, generally, is going to make our life a lot easier. So we'll process the ore, no question, in this area. Now, considering how much less volume the materials are after processing, right? We said we concentrate from 72 uranium ore down to, well, this will be 12 yellow cake, right? Not so big a deal to transport this if we wanted to elsewhere for the downstream steps. And frankly, if I'm being honest, it's probably smart to have your reactor, in case of emergency, not across the street from your population center. But we'll probably just build our way north here for each of the consecutive steps and do our best not to explode. So, last consideration before we start sketching things out. Nuclear 2 is very close. In fact, we could research it right now, except that there is a requirement to have produced 200 spent fuel, which is just another way of saying we've operated a basic plant for a little while. So we're going to build with Nuclear Reactor 2 in mind and upgrade when we can. It's an upgrade in place building. It has an additional power level, so we can go from 90 megawatts, we get an additional 30 megawatts to 120 for the numbers I was using up front to compare to coal, right? It also requires, therefore, an additional turbine, right? So we should probably keep that in mind, blueprint it even if we don't build it right away. It also accepts more advanced fuel and is able to regulate itself a little bit better. But beyond leaving room for that extra turbine, it doesn't impact the shape of our initial build. We will talk about sort of the waste reprocessing that we'll have to build a little module for. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's sketch out ore processing first. Again, as an input, we make 72 uranium ore right away. Now, those are convenient numbers because that's exactly what an ore crusher can process. One of those matches up to 2 settling tanks. Now, those settling tanks require acid. And that acid will be used for a number of different processes in this area. I'm going to think about acid production here as like a shared service across the different steps. We'll see that will come into play a little bit more a little bit later on, but we'll keep it off to the side for now. We need to process our toxic slurry. The good news, look at these numbers, we'll be just fine with one wastewater treatment plant around here somewhere as well. This will produce yellow cake. Great. The other thing we should talk about is how we're going to do water. I left over here from my initial sketches before I turned the camera on, whoops, a thermal desalinator. You'll notice this thermal desalinator actually only has one of the 4 recipes it's capable of selected. This depleted steam is very low energy steam that we can normally capture in a large cooling tower with a 3/4 recycling rate. And that's not bad. That's what we do most of the time at other power plants and other places that generate it around our island. Given the volume, however, we could get back 18, for example, of this 24, or we could mix it with not very much seawater and produce much more than 18 water and a little bit of brine. Now, I told you we need a little bit of brine over here, and Lord knows we're going to need plenty of water. In fact, if you solve for processing as much of your depleted steam through these thermal desalinators as possible, your entire nuclear power plant system can be water positive. That's not a bad thing to be exporting to the rest of the base, in addition to the massive amount of power. When you consider that this reservoir alert has been on for I don't even know how long anymore, and that this one has only just recently recovered, not to mention the fact that those are true despite the fact that we increased pretty significantly our desalination efforts here, and that there's another one over here, I'm not too upset by the idea of creating a little bit of excess water. Now, it's not free, right? It doesn't magically generate water. It takes seawater. Fine, no problem. That's meaningless, really. We just have to get 2-ish seawater pumps to fuel the 16 of these that it will take to absorb all of the depleted steam of a nuclear reactor 2. No big deal. But the thing about cooling tower larges that I think is easy to forget, there is no maintenance requirement, there is no electricity requirement, there is no employment requirement. This is a one-time capital purchase that is free to operate afterwards. That is not true here. These are not crazy numbers, but when you multiply them all by 16, they start to be a little bit more impactful. We're still going to do this. I still think it's pretty close to a no-brainer if you'd like to go through the trouble, but it'll take 64 workers. It'll take 24 maintenance, 1, not a big deal. And it'll reduce the net power generation of our plant by what, 6.5 megawatts? Okay, we'll live with that. That's a trade-off we'll take. Even if it is a trade-off, it's a trade-off we'll take. All right. That's ore processing. What do we do next? I'm going to try to keep these visually separated, although we're going to go through and build them in stages, right? But let's keep them all sort of near each other for our own visual organization. Yellow cake is the input to an enrichment plant. This is the first of the enrichment steps. It can handle 3 yellow cake enrichment plant. This settling tank is enough to fuel 2 of them. We have 2 of these, so we need 4 enrichment plants downstream of the 72 uranium ore we're putting into this system. Now, I told you in the longer run there are many more recipes, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff. So when we build this, we're going to want our enrichment plants to be flexible on the inputs that they receive, prioritizing things that are more valuable to us in the longer run. We can only supply yellowcake right now, but it's something to build with the future in mind. It also takes, pretty much no matter which recipe, hydrogen fluoride. We said rock and acid. Okay. Well, we're already making acid somewhere else. So, why don't we consider... You can think about this one of 2 ways. We can consider this building part of the enrichment plant step. Or, if you want, you can consider it part of the shared services module that goes along with acid production, because it immediately consumes it, and it just takes rock and spits out slag. The big question there, I think, is, well, how much of this do we need, and is there a reason to export any more of it to the rest of the base, or should we just consider this an integrated part of the enrichment step? Each of these takes 1. This is enough for 3 times the number of enrichment plants that we have here. Okay. So we have excess. Is there value in accessing it to the rest, or is there value in exporting that excess, to the rest of the base? The only thing in the game that consumes it, other than enrichment plants, is a chemical 2 plant mixed with ammonia and steel to create anesthetics, which are an important ingredient for making medical supplies 3. We currently only produce medical supplies 1. We don't even have 2 unlocked. So that's a little down the road. We might create an extra storage. Maybe it'll be accessible, but we're not going to stress about it quite yet, because it's also quite easy to produce elsewhere as well. So this is enrichment. The last thing we have to do is package it in steel. Frankly, at these ratios, an assembly 4 is kind of overkill. We're producing a total of 2 enrichment 4, enriched uranium 4. I want to call it EU4, but that is a paradox game. EU5 will be out soon. I'm excited for that. I digress. One of these, or 4 of these, the 4 that we're going to build, creates 2. This is enough for twice as much. So we technically only need it to be an assembly 3 right now. But it's fewer workers. We have the teraflops. I think we're just going to build a 4 right away. The other thing we'll need to do is store depleted uranium. I am going to store it because it will be helpful. We'll keep this nearby somewhere, I'm sure. This is enrichment. Third step, power generation. We're going to need our water inputs, and in fact, frankly, given the importance of this system, I think we're going to have a pretty sizable water buffer here. We're also going to need to jumpstart this if we're only running our thermal desalinators off of steam depleted. We're going to catch 22 until we add some water at the beginning. So we'll do that. I would also suggest a buffer for your fuel as well. And to not output it yet, we're going to build a little bit of a buffer before we turn any of this on. And then I said we'll need our turbines. Nope. Copy, not paste. So we'll need something like this, more or less. And because we're not auto-balancing, I suppose you don't really need a flywheel on the end of these. It's a rotational inertia physical battery. And because we very explicitly are not going to do variable steam or variable power production on these turbines, I don't think we technically need it. But it looks odd to me without it. I don't know. That said, it makes this wider than it needs to be. So let's... better safe to be sorry, right? Let's leave the width, just in case. We are going to have to run pipes out this side anyway, so it's not that big a deal. As we said, once we get up to reactor 2, hopefully in the near future, we'll have enough for 4 of these. Now, to be clear, a shaft can handle 72, right? So you could do these long ways if you prefer. I prefer to have them correspond to the power levels of the nuclear reactor. I just find that cleaner organizationally. But whatever you prefer, play the game the way that you enjoy. Finally, we're going to need to store this spent fuel in the meanwhile, and then we'll save room for reprocessing downstream, which will cycle back to our enrichment step. Let's get 2 of these to start. Something else to keep in mind. This stuff is radioactive, but only if it is outside of, well, I guess technically the reactor, although it becomes outside of the reactor pretty quickly after being generated, but only if it's not in one of these storages, which means technically if it's on the belt that you're presumably running, it is emitting radioactivity out into the environment. Not a ton, but if you really want to min-max or be super safe, use a very fast belt. It doesn't generate a ton of this, right? But zip the one along quickly, certainly don't let it back up. Not something to stress about too much, but a consideration. The other thing we said, right, was we're going to talk about how we're going to handle our depleted steam. These thermal desalinators actually don't have to be coastally located, right? We can run the seawater pipe somewhere if we want. Now, I suggest pretty strongly that you have backup cooling towers. You really don't want to find yourself in a situation where you don't have something to handle a pretty high volume of depleted steam. And you're going to need something to handle or to cover the depleted steam that can come out of a cooling, an emergency cooling activation. If you wanted enough of these to process all of this depleted steam and the emergency depleted steam, you would need 5 of these. One of these at 96 can handle 1 turbine. So you need 1 of these per turbine, and then 1 extra, just in case they're all foregoing and this is somehow also activated. Should never happen. But again, these are free to operate. So I suggest a little cooling tower area. With a priority balanced pipe situation. And you prioritize out to your desalinators. Well, how many of these do we need? I was throwing some numbers around earlier, but you need, in order to handle one of these low pressure turbines, you need 2, right? If they each take 24. So if we need 2 of these for every one of these, and we have 8 of these, we need 16. It's quite a few, right? The other thing that this costs, when I was highlighting the trade-offs, is space. That's not the end of the world. It's doable. But it's something to keep in mind. It's the other reason I highlighted that it doesn't have to be coastal. That's a lot of space near valuable coastline that I don't really want to take up. But 8 times 15, right? We only need just over 2 seawater pumps, because these each do 108. This is much less space to absorb on a coastline. In fact, I wonder if we can even sneak them in here. Incredible. Because what else are we going to use that little bit of space for? We might build them in at breaks. I don't know. We'll see. Point is they're flexible. This does not have to be in the way there. The other thing to keep in mind is we'll be running the 2 outputs. Well, one will be recycling a whole bunch of water, priority, here, back to our system, but then the excess will need to connect up with our water main somewhere. And we will probably want to make sure that wherever that somewhere is, receives priority from here. So further north, not a big deal, not a problem. This is probably closer to wherever we want to plug in anyway. Okay. I think that's enough talking. I think it's time to start sketching out some modules. So, I'm going to pop in and out here, but I'll time-lapse the belt work and pipe work, but we'll explain probably each step as we go along. But this should actually be, now that we've spent I don't know how long talking about it, pretty straightforward to execute. So, I'll be right back. Okay, so popping back in here briefly to share the thoughts on the ore processing steps. So, as we said, our cargo dock is going to be our main source. I'm going to do just one large storage buffer here. To be honest with you, I'm irritated at the behavior of these. There's a preference, right, to pull from one of these. And it means that we have eventually like uneven unloading of our ore trains. So as much as I like the aesthetic of as many of these fit directly there, it's actually kind of messes up some of your logistics. And we're talking about pretty low volumes here. This will be an enormous buffer as it is. The only other consideration I have is I mentioned the potential for train delivery here in the longer run. So I do want to make sure that we have some space in our system to route with priority, storage from from a train station as well. I would think about this as roughly having this shape of track and then coming back to the main line here, which I'm sure will actually straighten out a bit. But so I'm imagining a train system or a train station and storage here, and I just want to leave enough room, which I actually definitely have not done, at the crusher level for essentially for a priority balancer, right? So these guys require 1 space extra. So that's probably min-maxing a little bit too much. I'm not building this right away anyway, but how about that? If we want to run a second reactor, we'll still have the ability to pretty easily copy-paste a second set here. Shouldn't cost us space we don't have. So that's the thought. Then the question becomes, okay, so we're gonna have to run in acid and we're going to have to run out slurry. How do we want to do that? Well, I figure let's have all of these over here in their own sort of, shared services support module, whatever you want to call it, right? And water's an output here, water's an input here, might as well prioritize it. Acid can also feed into the settling tank, etc. So we'll finish the shape of this area a little bit more later. We're going to need a slag export, we're going to need a sulfur import, we're going to need filter media import. We'll figure this out, but I think these three live together roughly in this area. Might even be able to pull them in a bit closer. Now it's time for enrichment. To be honest, this is straightforward as well. So I guess we'll just talk about it here. We already said hydrogen fluoride comes through here. I think we will add a storage buffer for yellow cake. So let's do that real quick. Doesn't need to be large. We'll probably slap one of these in here. And then we'll have our loose storage for depleted uranium. We'll probably accumulate this for some time before we use it. There may eventually come a time when we need to dump some excess, but I'm not in a rush to get there. Okay. I'm going to set up the rest of these and some belt work, and we'll talk again very soon. Okay, so checking in. Yeah, I doubled everything, obviously. You've noticed. I don't know, just sort of realized if I was going to future-proof plan for it, might as well actually build it. We'll probably just start with the one, but this will eventually be enough to do 2 reactor 2s. So let's talk about, well, we took our, again, so we grind, and we have our settling tank. Our yellow cake comes out here. We have a, if I assign it, yellow cake buffer here. This goes in to our enrichment plant set. We'll only build 4 of these to start, probably just 1/2. But it also needs to be able to take, via this flat input, things like reprocessed uranium. So it will need access there as well. So I figured let's build it now with enough space. I almost built it too thin in between here. This is why you have to think about future-proofing. And then this outputs, of course, our EU4. That comes around here, merges up with the other set, and goes directly into an assembly 4. Now this actually will be enough to handle 8 of these enrichment plants worth of EU4. It needs a little bit of steel. Frankly, this is probably overkill, but we have the steel. Why not? And then it will itself go into a little bit of a buffer. Voila. Okay. The other consideration is sort of thinking about our support buildings as well. For this volume, right, we're now talking about 4 times 36, which is 144, which means we either need a second one of these or to be willing to boost it when we get to that point. That's very far down the road, but it'd be nice to have space to build a second one of these, I suppose. It also will have, these 3 will have their own kind of inputs and outputs that we aren't gonna have to worry about elsewhere. Steel being dropped off is one external input here, but everything else is just kind of coming directly out here or from these buildings. So these actually probably should be more accessible towards the rest of our base, if possible. So that's why I think it probably makes more sense to have them over here. That said, we're pushing up against our theoretical train station, which I think we could limit to this footprint, roughly speaking. But of course, it's also pushing up against the actual limestone setup right now. So might have to delete, rebuild some of this. This is all very temporary anyway, until we can clear this space out. But you know, if we decide that this is the space we want to put these buildings in the longer run, that's way more important. So I will make that call in another, hopefully, brief little segment here. And then it'll be time to do the water and power parts. So be right back again. Okay, so I think this is what we're going to do for the hydrogen fluoride, acid, and wastewater treatment. I think this works. So we bring in sulfur here, we bring in rock here, we bring in filter media here. We export slag here. This is still going to be a roadway, I think. We probably need to connect it up out here better. But it's one of the sort of the barriers. I think this will also serve as a path through as well. And I suppose it'll have to zigzag around to avoid this, or we could just delete these. They're not strictly necessary, but I'd like the idea for trucks to be able to pass through here along the waterfront. We'll figure out the precision of the roads later. That's not the most important part. The most important part is that I think this works. And we have nice little safety buffers here of acid and HF. This will serve us for quite some time. And if we ever have to boost it, we certainly can. We still need to get the water setup going here. Let's think. Yeah, we're not going to be running this at full, but I think this will roughly offset the water. But we do need to make sure that we have some sort of, priority balancing system when we connect that water into the rest of our pipe setup, which is probably the next thing to think about. So I think I'll do that next. Let's go. Ooh, okay. I think that worked. Pretty high stakes copy paste there. What are we missing? Surely something, right? Yeah, one tiny little connection down here. But ultimately, that was a time saver. Oh my. Okay. I think we're here. I think we're ready, right? I think this is correct. The one thing I haven't hooked up yet is this battery. I'm not even really convinced we're going to use it right away, if at all. The only reason I have a battery even blueprinted here is in order to upgrade this to a nuclear reactor 2, we are going to have to shut it down. And it would be nice to keep things running with a little bit of stored steam, but we don't have to do that now. I think we are going to start building. Let me give you the quick tour first, and then we'll turn things on. So, coming back here where we last talked, we have uranium rods come out. I have it currently set up so that it won't output anything to the belt yet because I don't want anything to run until we have a bit of a buffer, but ultimately it will go out here. There's also a priority balancer because I want it to be able to accept other fuel types, which are likely to come from the reprocessing area, but also sort of be spit out through some part of this enrichment space. So we'll thread some needles when we have to there, but it then spits out waste up a level so we can keep an eye on it, which shoots back here. We're definitely gonna need more than one of these in the longer run, but we'll let this mine finish first so we don't collapse anything filled with waste. But this will live here, and then it'll eventually spit out that waste to the reprocessing area where the depleted uranium is currently stored now, but this will turn into that area, I'm sure. The reactor is here, as we said. It spits out steam. I actually decided, rather than worrying about looping back and getting a little bit of extra water in the off chance that we ever have to run the emergency cooling, if we have to run the emergency cooling, I want to know, and I don't mind if water is wasted. So we're just gonna run it through this smokestack. Ideally, we'll never see this smokestack go off at all. If we do, we know we've got a problem. So it doubles as both a simpler way to solve this without having to recycle water and actually a visual alarm. So fine, good. A large smokestack would also do that, but this is simpler. Okay, steam comes out here. There's a balancer here just so that we can do this battery shenanigan if we want to, but generally it comes along here. It feeds into each of these turbines. Each of these turbines processes the steam high into steam low into steam depleted, which is collected back out here into this large pipe down a level on the floor. That large pipe comes along here, is fed with priority into our vacuum desalinators, who take that along with, on the bottom level, seawater that comes out along this pipeline here, all the way out to our two pumps here. On the way back, this line, facing the other direction, is brine. Brine prioritizes supply, small amount, but still some, to the wastewater treatment plant. These desalinators spit out, in addition to that brine, proper water. That water is this big pipe on the ground where it meets up on both sides out here in this balancer. Priority to those two pipes for feeding back in to the nuclear reactor, with water back up here as necessary. I think the one other thing we need to do, now that I think about it, is to run a deprioritized excess water pipe out to the base, right? That was the whole point of doing it with extra desalination. I don't know, something like that, but I'll put a balancer in before we turn everything on, don't worry. Those same two pipes, the steam depleted input, deprioritized comes out here to these cooling towers as backups, and they spit the same water back into the same priority recycling input pipes here. Okay. The last little bit of water connection to keep in mind is that we have our wastewater treatment plant makes water, and I believe it's going to make more water than our acid mixer requires. It's a decent chance that I'll have to make some adjustments here, but I'm pretty sure this will outproduce what this consumes, at least in the longer run. So excess water will come back here into the same recycling loop. So I think we should be good. I, personally, am going to take a short break that you won't notice, but then we're going to turn this on in phases. Should be quite fun. Okay, and we are back. Lovely little lunch break on my end. And I think I'm ready to start building. So, let's unpause and get after it. We'll start with infrastructure. We want our trucks, of course, to still be able to navigate. I suppose, actually, we'll need to get ramps over top of this as well. So we'll do that. I think we'll also, might as well, get the water infrastructure going. And as a reminder, we're only going to do half of this capacity to start. Although, we'll of course need to get the belts going. Might as well do all of this as well. I think the move, for now, is going to be to let our trucks chip away at this while we maybe also consider what to do about the wood problem. Nice timing. Great alert. So, wood is going to be a contract where we export household appliances and get wood in high volume. It's a 10 to 1-ish contract, and that's great. It's, I suppose, this one? Yep. And we have maximum reputation with this settlement as well, so we are ready to do that as soon as we get ourselves a cargo dock. I'm slightly concerned that this is going to screw up access for our trading dock. I have no problem moving the trading dock. What would be more concerning is if we screw up access to the shipyard. But I'd like this to be here in a vacuum. Let's just slap it down for a second. And of course it does. Because, well, that's where these are. And where do we take the wood most often? It's right up the road here too. So I think this probably makes rough sense. How far over would we have to put it to not have to deal with the trading dock? Nope, and here we start to collide with that one. So, I mean, that could work. Is that the end of the world? Maybe let's just see if we can't get it a tiny bit further left. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's just going to be mad. There. You know what? Sure, I think we can live with that. And this road is going to get kind of crowded because we're also going to need, of course, some loose modules. Not loose modules. We need unit modules for this one, because this will be wood and household goods, which are both flat belt unit storages. Interesting. I don't know why some of these are creating our visual or not. Interesting. I hope that's not a mark of any sort of functional issue. We're going to find out. I think we'll have to bring in oil manually here. So let's get all this going. We are also going to need a cargo ship. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we'll be okay. Let's assign this a contract. Do we have the Unity for it now? I think we do. Bam. So this will cost Unity in 3 measures. 1, it took some as a one-time to set it up initially. 2, it will cost us per delivery, per ship. And 3, it will just cost us continuously, 0.2, to maintain it. But once these are all built, we'll start bringing over household appliances. Our ship will take those out and come back with a whole bunch of wood. And you saw the ratio, right? But this ship can hold a lot more than 1,666 units. So it'll take more than 166 and it'll bring back more than 1,500. This seems to be going all right. We've certainly got uranium ore. And would you look at this, the moment we get acid up and running, let's say you can bring water for now, just to get things jump started. Once this is going, we should start to have yellow cake. Which means let's let that get built. Here we go. Great. All right. What to build next? I suppose it would be best to start on fuel production. So let's do all this. And I suppose technically we don't need those quite yet either. But yeah, it would be good to get these piled up. Remember, there's a minimum buffer requirement. So we're not going to turn this on until we have some here. I don't know what the number is. We'll figure it out. I don't know what I think about the layout here. It's one of my classic, it just kind of got placed down. There's like a rationale for the modules looking, or like being next to each other, roughly speaking, but I don't know if there's much in the way of organization or like an overall design. It's one of the things that I would love to keep working on, but I also just kind of like the, you know, it lands how it lands kind of nature sometimes, especially when it fits within, you know, structural geographic constraints or whatever. I think that's kind of fun. All right, this is our massive water pipe back to the water main that I should probably try to be a bit more intelligent about. but I mean, honestly, I think it's fine. For now, at least. So maybe I'll just place a nice little balancer in here quickly. So I suppose the other thing we could do now that we're doing wood a different way, we don't need tree harvesters anymore. So let's save ourselves the truck network capacity. We could, and I'm not going to keep them around for now, but we could bother chopping down trees when we get over to this island in the longer run, but not super worried about it, and definitely not worth keeping tree harvesters around for. Product to import. Well, of course we want to import the wood. I suppose we will need one of these for household appliances, and then I think if it's roughly a 10-to-1 ratio, I think, what, 7-to-1 if we have 8 slots here? This won't be full, but I think that'll work. Oh, and yeah, obviously you can bring stuff by truck. That's the point. Suppose we'll move this up a little bit. Wood is pretty important, so we do need to make sure that this moves, you know? And then this will also need its fuel changed. And I think since this is pretty high volume, and because we're going through quite a lot of heavy oil now, I think we'll keep that lower. How are we doing? All right, good. So we just need the hydrogen fluoride, which I'm sure... Oh, yeah. Whoops, I never ran that pipe out. Aha. Oh, you knew we were going to forget something. So, let's do that real quick, huh? There we go. Pipe is lit up, so we must be sending material. And there we go. It's working. Takes 2 minutes to make one of these. It doesn't spit out a half every minute. It spits out one every 2, of course. But that's exciting. That's progress. And then he'll make his way around here to that assembly. Yeah, the water supply thing is going to be something getting us started. For acid. Maybe we're just going to make a temporary little jump start here. Wow, we're like out of construction parts 1 because of the wood thing. Whoops. Well, I mean, good news, we certainly have the household appliances. This is just a heavy oil problem. Loot. Neat. I assume we're not cracking anything over here if we're full. But rather than assuming, let's ensure. And I am going to allow trucks to take from here. We could pave this area so it looks a little better. Busy vehicles. Oh, that's right. Since we scrapped the 2 tree harvesters, could go ahead and grab ourselves a couple more trucks. 3, in fact. Would you look at that? Our first couple uranium rods. Beautiful. Ah. No brine yet. Naturally. Right. Okay. So then, I suppose it's time. How does this run without steam? I suppose it doesn't properly. So I think we might also need a bit of a temporary little supply here too, but where are we going to get brine? That's an interesting question. I don't think we store brine anywhere. We certainly can, but I think we are going to have to go make it. Yep, I think that's a good idea. We actually have more parts too. So we're just going to make it larger than we need to because it's simpler. Because we still don't quite have the wood. But I believe absence of ship means he's on his way. Let's see. Good. So water's coming in here. Crank up the speed. Let it get sorted. This gets the acid going. Oh, look. Wood's here. All right. Here come the trucks. Good to see. Here's our delivery. Oh, you can see all my little quick trades, by the way. This was the last time we actually had a tree harvester working. And this is what one ship drop-off looks like. So that's why this is better, I think, personally. Okay, so good. We are officially full on acid pretty quick once it gets going. Let's see if we can't build up the buffer on hydrogen fluoride as well, but that means that these should all be running pretty much at max capacity. Not quite still working on the settling tanks, but we could boost that process as well. Good. Okay. Well, then we could start building the rest of this infrastructure too. So, how about it? somewhere to put the waste. Going to be an important thing to have. The fuel supply line, of course, as well. Why not build the big fella? Water's going to be important. Ah, heck. Just do it all. Nothing's getting turned on until we say so, so we'll just let our trucks take care of that as quickly as they can. So the crusher and settling tanks we can boost. Even the wastewater treatment, actually, we can boost. But we cannot boost enrichment plants. So this water, yep, is about to have somewhere to go. In fact, we might as well. Yeah. Yeah, workers is about to become a bit of an issue for us here, I think. So, in fact, we're going to unload there. You might notice I did actually build a little bit more population in between episodes as well. Sorry, I forgot to call that out. But that is something we needed. And I think we're going to have to do another one. Because we're having this trouble before we finish building this entire complex. And not only have we paused all of our labs, we've paused all of the lab equipment manufacturing that goes along with it. That's quite a few jobs that we're gonna need again soon. So we kind of have to do this. The other thing we'll be able to get back, however, is the coal mine is no longer going to be super necessary. And maybe we could draw back. I mean, these are pretty small, 18. We could draw back on our oil as well, even though it is still helpful to have supplementing. The other thing we can do to generate a few workers as well would be to upgrade some of our assembly 3s to 4s. Of course, that'll take more mainframe computers, which will take more power, but, you know, we're kind of working on it over here. And until we're actually generating the steam we need to process, there's no point in taking up 32 workers right there alone. These are much less worker intensive. 8 per turbine. This itself, though, pretty meaty, right? 80. And, by the way, 45 maintenance too. Totally doable, right? But I think that's probably by far our biggest single consumer. Why are our recyclables backed up? Glass, because we're not consuming enough over here, I assume. I don't love that it's using sand mix at all. Whoa, why is it all jammed up? Because water. Interesting. Yeah, all right, so we actually do have to prioritize water from this direction based on the way that our water main is set up, or it screws up our glass production, which is an odd set of consequences, but it is true until I put a balancer in here. We still have a bunch of extra wood sitting in here. It's pretty good. Maybe we'll even say, just to get it started, let's get some water in here because I want to get this charged. And of course, we'll have to get the system running before it generates water. So, might as well. Good. We're starting to build up a bit of a buffer on the lines itself. And once we start to have some backed up here, we can stop boosting all of this, but probably still worth it in the meanwhile. So is this generating more water now than our mixer requires? I do think it is. Like, are we seeing water shoot through here every once in a while? Surge? Not quite. Are you getting what you need? Certainly seems that way. Well, we'll see in the longer run. And we have enough hydrogen fluoride, too. Our heavy oil fuel is working well too. These shouldn't have to run very often. The whole point of them being large is that when they do run, they bring back a lot. So it should be more fuel efficient, but it obviously has a little bit of a startup cost to build that buffer. Hey, so filter media, in case you missed it last time, as part of our revamped wastewater treatment plant setup, we made a bunch for export as well, because this is the other place that uses filter media. How are we doing here? Construction parts, 3. That tracks. This was full at the beginning of the episode. That's why we needed to charge it up, you know? It's quite an expensive build. I think we can probably prioritize to 3s for now. And in fact, 3s over 4s is probably the right move too. What still needs builds? There's a few 4s in here, don't get me wrong. This is 3s. This is 3s. Okay. We can just do that, though. Exactly 1 episode after I had to spend, I don't even want to tell you how many hours the original recording was, last episode digging ourselves out of a hole. It is a lesson I just don't seem to learn. We do need to prioritize this, though. So we do not have the workers. So that needs to happen before these. The good news, and you know what, in fact, we can pause the build of one entire turbine, right? Until we get to a nuclear reactor 2, we're only ever going to use 3 of these at best. So let's prioritize like that. And then on the worker front, we can pause here too. Water's good. Hopefully that means it does. We have cooling. And this pipe being blue is a function of our wastewater processing over here. as is this. Oh, and it's just sitting there, of course, because there it is. Pretty classic. Every episode. It looks like our mine is productive enough. Yep, there's quite a bit stored there as well. Very good. How is our production? So we're doing 48 a minute. Between those two, we are consuming half. Good. No problem at all. This buffer is gonna eat that for a while, right? On the ship right now, there will always be sort of demand for 750. Is this, one of these is empty. Interesting. But so 750 will basically live in the boat for forever. It won't trade all 750. That's the capacity it has for one of its 8 slots, which you have to assign at least one of the slots. So it'll bring back, I think, all 7 of these should be full on wood. I don't know why it says empty. But everything it brings back will be full on wood, and it won't have spent the entirety of this one. But there's a buffer we need to build up because it's 750 on the ship and another 1,000 here. So this will not stay full for quite some time, even though we're doing just fine on production. Great. Time for more graphite storage. And that, unfortunately, is 120 of our parts 3. Too bad. I think that means we can actually prioritize 4 then, since we solved parts 3 out here. These are all just 4s, right? Yeah. As is this, which is more urgent. So we'll continue to prioritize that. I'm gonna play around with, I've been enjoying paving. I think it's a great aesthetic, even if it's just like clean, crisp, unpainted. But we could add another layer to our builds here a little bit. So, like, this is clearly an area to drive through. This is clearly not. And we did play around a little bit with the painting in, I don't know how many episodes ago it was now, when we did a little bit of exploration with the new tools. The way I see it, none of this is really truly road. Nor this. Although this is certainly turned into one. Maybe we should pave it. At least out to here. And this looks silly without it too. But I don't know. Maybe that makes this not road. I don't know if I like that. Not sure. Nah. But radioactive? That's a good one. Sure. Well, now we have to get this all built so that I'm not a liar for saying 120. It's only going to be 90 for now. Well, truth in advertising, right? But we'll leave the spot, and then we can upgrade. Yellow cake, officially stockpiling. And that's a pretty decent number of rods. Did we get the... Good. Okay. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Once this goes, our pop will start to increase. I'm even going to use some Unity to adopt some pops off the map. And we're going to turn some stuff on. I always forget which of these you can adopt from. I know this one, because it's the first one you find. This one does too. But that's it for now, but that will be fine. Okay. It would be nice to get a second one going, but we can start at least with number 1. Let's see. So, of 16, we'll need 4 to handle the outputs of 1 turbine. We can turn this to power level 1, but let's get fuel into the reactor first. That will be step 1. So, here they go. Well, this will be 30 megawatts to start. Fuel in the reactor, full. Power level 1, let's go. And you see, it works its way up, and the heat has to build. Once we get to green, it'll start to make steam, right? But we don't want to go above this. Here comes our steam. Getting some steam just piling up into pipes, I guess. That's all right, though. Speed it up. And here it comes, our first waste. There he goes. To be stored deep underground for a while. Now we have 2 turbines, so I think it's time to go up to power level 2. Which does mean it's time for another set. Anytime these go off, right? That means... Nope. It means I forgot to build a pipe segment. Okay. Well, that's why it's nice that they are visual. Hopefully this starts to accumulate here. I don't know how it would. We didn't exactly set up any input pipes. Great work. Great work. All right, priority here would be directly back into the system. Next priority would be to circle back around. Geez. And resolved. Silly mistake, easy fix. Priority will be here. And then excess back out to the base. Okay. Goodness. Now we should slowly but surely stop seeing trucks deliver here as this system kicks into gear. This is why you do everything slowly and you test, because something's always broken. Something's always broken. That's all right. Good. We're hovering steady. In fact, starting to creep up ever so slightly. Not quite, but soon. Good. For something with such low volume, like the amount you actually have stored on a belt is kind of an important part of your strategic buffer, right? There's 60 of them sitting on that belt, plus whatever's contained inside the balancer itself there. And that is, 150% the size of the internal buffer. So very good. It looks so cool. I love the graphics on this. That shade of blue is just awesome. Okay. Well, we obviously have a ton of power generating now. So we can do two things. One of two things, some combination of two things. One, from a power savings perspective, we can start to put our coal power onto auto balance so that it's less consumed, because we've been producing, I guess, a little bit more than we have to. The other thing we could do is just consume more, and I've seen our teraflops kind of float there. We don't have the construction parts for it, but I think we're probably going to crank up our consumption as a result of this as well. And that will be enough for level 3. Let's go. None of these alerts is anywhere near as important as level 3 on the reactor. Cool. I think we're set. We are officially producing 90 megawatts. I hate that it does this. I want to see the source, of course they're produced by power generators. What else would they be produced by? I want to see the fuel source breakdown, Too bad. So be it. This is it, though. Our buffers are built here and here. We're all set over here. I do think I might quickly add a buffer here, just because it's sort of spiky production, and I don't really like that. Requiring boosts every once in a while. It'll smooth itself out with a buffer, so 2 seconds. And that should allow us to take the Unity off that one. Because again, we should not be producing... I guess these were boosted, right, to be clear, but we're making 72. This should be more than enough. Now that these aren't boosted. It did need to be before. Very cool. Adding more teraflops. I keep seeing flickering red. Okay, and that does, because these are firing, right, mean that we need to go 4 more here. And this is it. This is it. This is a nuclear power plant. Pretty cool. So what's next? We got to accumulate 200 here. Once we do, we'll get nuclear reactor 2. We can run our waste through a reprocessing plant. We can make MOX rods with those products. That'll be the next stage. Stay tuned. Well, this is a blast. I've been looking forward to this one for some time. Not just because it's a fun little build in and of itself, but because of what it's going to unlock for us. This is just the beginning of power not being a problem anymore, which is a very fun stage of the game. Hopefully the complexity is manageable. You know, try to break it into digestible chunks. I hope that the ore processing versus enrichment versus power gen versus waste framework helps a little bit. And you'll see, I think, the value of this shared services module as well when we get into the waste processing part very soon too. Cool stuff. All right. Well, yeah, definitely enjoyed myself in this one. I hope you did as well. If you did, be sure to tune in again next time. I think we'll try to push right through to Nuclear 2. I mean, why not? We're on a roll, and it's manageable. We just got to let this thing run for a minute. So let's plan on that. We'll catch you in the next one for a little bit more nuclear action. But until then, have a good rest of your day, and bye-bye.